We're going to do the sourdough starter video today. I'm going to do the do a batch of bread, but I want to put a quick disclaimer out here. This is not a quick video, all right? Because I know some people that they want to see something, they want to learn it, they want to learn it like now. And there's a lot of information to give, a lot of just life experience, a lot of things to share, and that's there. I find that as I'm doing this video, that I'm sharing a lot of information that some will find useful and some won't. Some will say, oh, too long of a video, too much talking. And I just want to put this disclaimer out here. If you are learn it in 3 minutes, this is not the video for you. If you are a person that wants to hear other people's experiences and just likes to gab. I like to gab when I cook. I mean, that's half the fun of it, right? I mean, that's what we're about. We're about community, and we're about relationship, and we're about come to our kitchen and enjoy us for a minute, because we're going to enjoy you. So I'm going to ramble on, and I've warned you, and you guys can stick around, which I hope you do, and if you don't, I understand. So let's get back to it. We're going to talk about sourdough starter today. As you know, I've done videos on commercial yeast, and if anybody heard the video or listened to the video a few years back, we talked about how long it took me to make yeast bread just because I never had made it and it was intimidating. And the same thing with sourdough. I've not been making sourdough nearly as long as I have been making yeast bread, but I have been making it for a while. I'm pretty confident with it now. As you can see, I have a whole library on just sourdough bread alone. I also have this many books alone on fermentation and this many books alone on nourishing your health through the kitchen, which includes sourdough starters, because sourdough starters are alive. Okay. Now way back when, sourdough was not referred to as sourdough, it was referred to as yeast sponges. Today's big, in our culture, we think, and we've talked about this before, how homesteading seems to be one of those things where we think we've reinvented the wheel, and we haven't. We're just rediscovering lost arts that were lost over the last few decades. And anything we do is nothing new invented under the sun, as the word says. Same thing with sourdough, which is why, even though I have all these books, and I've thumbed through all of them, I don't go to this one. What I go to, imagine this, it's my 1891 cookbook, and this holds the information of wealth. And the funny thing is when you read this and compared to an older cookbook, it's almost like they're trying to get away from the sponges and the sourdoughs. They put it in there as a footnote type situation, but which is why we're in the state that we are in with all commercial yeast, which is really unhealthy for us. We are I say we're going to. What I would like to do is go through some of these recipes someday. Maybe do a little series on cooking through this in the wood cook stove. But my point is because sourdough or natural yeast, it's not a new thing. Don't be intimidated by it. So it's totally natural to be intimidated by certain things like fermentation, creating your sourdough and keeping it going healthy. No, we don't know, don't go. That's why we're asking you. I'm not sure today was the best day to do a video because I think we're all kind of loopy here. When we just start something, and we get a little base knowledge on how to go forward with it, and we're not afraid to put our hands on it and make the mistakes, and we gain that knowledge, and we usually gain it pretty quick. I mean, that's how, we so often want to go into something, we want to have all the information and all the know-how, and it's just not the reality in the world today. We've got all these experts that graduate college, and they're experts in their fields. That's why we have marriage counselors that aren't married. That's why we have people counseling parents that don't have children. Okay, we've got to get our hands on these things in order to obtain knowledge. And it's the same thing in our day-to-day life. So, I'm not knocking marriage counselors, and I'm not knocking counselors for parents. I'm just saying there seems to be an issue. Just because we're learned does not make us knowledgeable. And so get your hands on stuff, make some mistakes, and be excited about what you learn. And that's what I'm going to tell you about today. What I learned and some mistakes I've made. Now, you can go down here. Get off me. Okay. I did not start off with 3 starters originally. All right. We have a variation of temperature in our home that's extreme because of the wood stoves or the wood heat. And so when it gets really warm in here, it can happen, you know, like at nighttime, and upstairs is pretty temperate. It can get really cold, so I'm not necessarily always aware how warm it is. And if my yeast has been on the counter, it can cause some problems. But I can't put it in the ice box because it'll get too cold and freeze, or it'll just get too cold and I will need to use it the next day. And you need to have your sourdough starter warm when you use it. So I'm learning to adapt my sourdough starter to these temperatures, and it's an ever learning process with this. Now, the other day when I did the video and I showed the sourdough bread on the video, my starter had been doing beautifully. I didn't have any problem with it. It was just plugging right along. A lot of people asked to do a sourdough video. When I said I might do one, they said, oh yeah, go ahead, do one. And that's when my starter started throwing me fits. So I spent the past few days trying to get it happy. A happy starter has a good pungent smell. It can be mild, it can be strong, but it's not an offensive smell. A starter that is starting to lose the pH balance, or the balance of good bacteria to bad bacteria, and the bad bacteria taking over, starts to have a rather repulsive smell. The only way that I can describe it is it's almost like vomit. If you've reached the vomit stage, throw it out. But if you're there and you're smelling your sourdough starter, you go, something's not just quite right. You might have that visual cross through your head. And if you're not 100% sure, then it's not too late to save your starter. One way that you can save your starter is by putting a specific fruit in it. You can put apple, which is what I do. Someone told me once that you could put pineapple in it. I've never done the pineapple, but I do know that the apple works. I don't know why the pineapple wouldn't work. The thing is that it's helping to balance out the bacteria in there, the enzymes, however you want to look at it. I mean, people refer to it to different ways. We basically start with a starter by flour and water, and that's like it. All right, not real complicated. Some people will say you want it pasty, some people will say you want it runny. And again, I think it's really just your home environment. You got to understand that each home is different. A lot of it's due to the heat. A lot of it's due to where you're going to set your starter, how much light is it going to be exposed to, and that will also what your flour you're working with. So you've got to have a watchful eye. A sourdough starter, when you use it, can you see how bubbly that is? Okay, yeah, the jar's pretty nasty, but I'm telling you what, when you happen to feed this, you just get to a point where you don't really care. I know that might be bad, but I was doing this late last night because I wanted to be able to use it this morning, and it was like 11:30, and I was feeding this thing, and I was off to bed. So I poured some of it out because you need to remove some in order to put fresh in, and the general rule of thumb is remove half and replace equal parts with what you remove. This is a thicker starter. As you can see, it's not moving much. Let's see. Okay, can you see that? This one, and I purposely did this, is very thin. All right, that one's very thin. They had 2 different smells too going on this morning. Now this one, being thicker, the smell's a little more pungent than I like. I don't like a real pungent, strong sourdough. My family loves sourdough, and my older guys don't care at what strength the sourdough is at, where my younger guys like it more milder. So it's just easy for me to stay across the board with that, and I prefer it more milder. This one is thicker too, but it doesn't smell quite as pungent as this one. So I'm going to work on this one a little bit more. I'm probably going to use this one today. This smells almost nice and fruity, or I might use this one. But so maybe I'll mix them. One part, well, let's just do it. You can use white flour, or you can use wheat flour. I've used both. Couple of things that'll happen differently, at least in my experience. When I use white flour, if I start to get a liquid across the top as your sourdough sits, and it will, and that's very natural. The liquid is on the top of your starter, whereas when we grind our wheat and I've started a new starter or even add to it, that liquid, because the wheat is larger chunks than the processed flour and raises, and the liquid falls below, so it's like a reverse thing. And when that first time that happened, it threw me off. Also, the other thing I've noticed is that wheat flour starter, if you're not staying on top of it, will go bad quicker. Turn it off. Okay, so I don't measure, okay? We know this, it's horrible, but looks like about a cup, maybe a cup and a half of flour. You can bring it on down here. Okay. And then I'm gonna start slow. I'm wanting about a pancake. I like about a pancake batter type consistency. That is my preference. And you know, a lot of it, that again, each home environment is different. You are going to, some may need to be thicker, where some may need to be thinner, just because of the reaction that your sourdough starter is having to the heat environment, the moisture. Most important is to remember this is a living, this is living food, and it's going to react to its environment. Now, hard lesson learned on my part. Think back to elementary school, and what does water and flour make? Water and flour make paste. And when you are doing these, if every time you stir your sourdough or you change your jar, which you should change your jar periodically to keep it clean, you want to rinse it right away, because this stuff is like glue that sticks till kingdom comes. You cannot get this stuff off. It is horrible. And I did this a couple times for getting late at night, and I remember now, because it really is, it's a bad deal. You got your starter going on, and you want to cap it, but you don't want to screw the cap down, because this is going to gas, and you want to release that gas, okay? In the summer, when bugs, because we're really buggy here, lots of little gnats and stuff, I will put cheesecloth or a piece of material over this. It can be an old t-shirt, whatever works, and then just put a rubber band around it, okay? Something, and if you do cheesecloth, you want to make sure it's multiple layers so that gnats and stuff can't get in there. Because of the fermentation, it attracts those types of bugs. If you get too much starter in your jar, and let's say you just fed it, and you've got an overabundance in there, don't be surprised if you wake up or when you go to check it that it hasn't oozed out. You've got to make sure you allow enough room in your starter jar for that to proof, or to call it yeast up, whatever you want to call it, to do its magic. But it's important that you give it enough space. So now, in my home, starting a new starter in this current temperature that I've got going on, I should be able to use it in about 3 days. Sourdough is a sacred cow for many people, all right? Many will say, no, you've got to have it at this temp for this long, for this many days, or you're not getting the preferred bacteria out of it. And that I'm not going to negate that, because I don't know enough about sourdough. All I know is how it works for our family. I know how our family life functions, and I know that if I needed a yeast, I needed it quick, I could use it and have used it as quick as 3 days. I also know there have been times that I have fed my sourdough and expected to be able to get up the next night and use it, like I did yesterday. I was going to do this video yesterday, and I got up and I'd fed my sourdough, and and I'd even put an apple in it the night before, and there was no go, and there was some smells in there I didn't like. Now, but in all reality, it should have done its thing, because I fed it the way I always do, and it should have responded the way it always did. But there was enough environment changes in the area for it that it didn't want to react. It didn't have enough stuff going on for it. Last night I fed it, and I woke up happy to see that everybody bubbled. Everybody did exactly what it was supposed to do. The smell that I did not like decreased. So sourdough is like any other recipe. For the most part, there's really no hard or fast rules that you have to stay with. It's a giving type of recipe. I mean, you know, you're doing candy making, there's certain things you've got to get to. You got to get certain temperatures you have to do. There's no variance on that. But when it comes to baking, there's a lot of variations that we can make. The main thing for your sourdough starter, sourdough likes minimum of around 70 degrees, all right, to work optimal. If you get your sourdough starter going and you don't find that you're using it often, you can put it in your refrigerator, which it stunts the growth. You just have to make sure that you get it out, allow it to warm up, and feed it, and then you can use it the following day. I don't have, you know, we wouldn't have that type of time, and my refrigeration temperatures is too unstable that it's not worth it for me to mess with. You'll note, as in my previous bread videos, I'm not using either of my big bread bowls, and that's because I do not use or make as big a batches of sourdough as I do yeast bread. Mainly because I'm not really confident doing it, and also because I really would prefer our sourdough bread to be as fresh as possible instead of having it for, you know, 3 or 4 days worth of stuff. Okay. Sourdough, you're going to start your sourdough. You're going to start your sourdough dough just like you would your yeast. You're going to use your warm water. You're going to put your salt, your oils in it. I do put a little sugar in mine. Some people don't put sugar in their sourdough. I like a little bit of sugar in there. Sweetener. You put a little sweetener in there. Maple syrup, anything that you could put in your regular commercial yeast is absolutely fine. You're going to want your liquid. You can go down here for a second. So I used, I don't know, I have 4 cups of liquid in there. I used olive oil for my fat, and I have a little bit of organic sugar. I didn't have any maple syrup. And what else? A tablespoon of salt. So you want that temperature to be like you were making commercial yeast, because heat's going to kill yeast, period, whether it's sourdough or whether it's commercial yeast. And it's just, you know, you don't have to thermometer or anything, just room temperature is fine. So this might be, you know, depending on, contrary to someone who has a lot of experience with sourdough, I don't measure my yeast. I go based on the size of batch of bread I'm making and the smell. If my yeast isn't really strong, then I'm more likely to put a little more of the sourdough in it, just to help it, to make sure that it rises without a problem. If my yeast is strong, then I will cut back on it, because I don't want the strong flavor in there of the bread. Like I said, my little ones don't like it. 30 feet, that's okay. Okay. I don't know, you know, about a half a cup to maybe a cup. I just don't want my apple peels chunks to come out here. And then I'll need to feed this again to keep it going. So that's, you know, that's the whole process of the sourdough, is that you continually feed it. If you're using it, you feed it on the days you use it. If you're not using it and you're keeping it on the counter, you need to keep close track of it. If you're not using it and you keep it in your ice box, like I said, it stunts the growth. It slows it way down. You can feed it like once a week. When you know, if you use it on Saturdays, take it out on. If it were me, I'd take it out like Thursday night. I'd feed it sometime Friday and use it Saturday morning. All right, so I do not have, and I haven't had for a while, I've been buying a different organic flour, my beloved flour that I did a video on. And I'm not using whole wheat right now. So you are just going for an elasticy texture. You know, it's just going to be the exact same thing as a regular commercial yeast for your feel for the dough. Now, I'm a little concerned because I had more liquid in there than I thought. So before I get any more in, I'm just going to put a little bit more sourdough starter in, just for a little peace of mind for myself. It would probably be fine. This is down home cooking. This is not, you know, the chef's kitchen or whatever the latest chef show is called. So I know there's probably better, more direct ways to do this, but this is what works in this old gal's kitchen. Oh, I just call myself old. All right, now big thing for me is that I don't want too much flour in my dough because then it'll be dry. I want a semi-sticky. By the time I'm done, I just want it nice and elasticy. We're almost there at this point. The other thing that you're going to want to do, or at least the other thing that I do not make like loaves of bread or rolls from this, because sourdough bread, in my experience, needs to cook a lot longer, you can come up, than a commercial yeast bread does. And that means when I'm talking like twice to 3 times as long. I don't like a thick crust, and the longer you cook a dough, the thicker the crust becomes. So I usually make what you saw the other day in the video, the I don't know what you call it, like pie pan type loaf is usually what I make. It spreads out.
Round bread.
Round bread.
Lump loaf?
Depending on the heat, like at night, if I were letting this raise, I would put it at the edge of the counter. You can show me the edge of the counter here, close to the stove. If I had because lots of times, the stove can get quite warm at night, and above in the warming oven, it can be too hot. You're almost like at the state of baking it by that point, and we're not wanting to bake it. We're just wanting to give it a little extra heat to help it rise. So, during the day when I let it rise, I keep it on the mid counter. I really don't have a good spot in the cabin right now that it's either too warm or too cool for stuff like this. I have to really be on top of this stuff. All right, go ahead and. All right, you see how this is a nice, in my opinion, texture for a dough. If I add any more flour to it, it's simply because I'm going to keep kneading it and I'm trying to keep it from sticking to me. But I wouldn't add any more flour to it because I wanted to thicken the dough. This is a really good texture for a sourdough if you want it to be somewhat airy and spongy. Now, the other thing I do, on my yeast roll, or the commercial yeast breads, I almost always give them a second rise. Not on my sourdough. I give them one rise, so that means that when I go to let them raise, I have them in the pan I'm going to cook them in. The commercial yeast, if I do a second raise, I just leave them in the bread bowl or on top of the kneading board and let them rise, and then I divide them up and let them rise again in their pans. With this, I put them right into their pan, and they'll raise from anywhere to 6 to 10 or more hours. The further away you have them from the heat, the longer it takes them to raise. The closer you have them, the quicker they raise. You can turn that off. So this batch was obviously bigger than the last one I made, because I only got 2 pans out of the last one. That was the other morning when I videoed it. This got 3. Again, the reason I make my breads like this, and you'll see actually a lot of sourdough breads made like this, is because they do take longer to cook. You bake them at a lower temperature. I bake them at a lower temperature, not necessarily a lot lower, but enough to where, it cooks reasonably safely for an hour to hour and a half, leaving the crust on top and bottom nice and golden brown. The top crust sometimes gets a little bit browner than what I normally would like. But if I try to make it into an actual bread shape, but I do the same thing though with my commercial yeast breads. I just like to make them into rolls, something smaller, so that they're not having to cook nearly as long. I do make loaves occasionally with my commercial yeast bread when I want to make French toast and stuff. But normally I like the shorter type of baked product. Now, some might be asking, why go to all this problem? You can go to the store and you can buy commercial yeast, which is perfectly fine. Well, there's a couple reasons to do that. Commercial yeast is not perfectly fine. A lot of people are having gluten problems, and they don't even realize that a lot of the gluten problems comes from not only the type of wheat that is being used in the flour. Because it's a modern wheat. It's not an heirloom wheat. It's not a heritage wheat. But the other thing is the commercial yeast. Commercial yeast are not something that our bodies process very well. Whereas sourdough, it's anything that's a living food, our bodies were intended to consume. And since sourdough is a living food, it really does do well. Josiah has a lot of immunity issues, and he doesn't do real well with commercial yeast, but he does do pretty good with sourdoughs. The other thing is because to do the sourdough, we do it because it's a source of independence. If I run out of commercial yeast and I'm planning on making a white bread or a yeast bread, I've got to go get some. But I have to go get some, and then I have to depend on the store to have the kind that I want. And that's bypassing the other reasons not to use it. You grow gardens, why? To be more independent. You raise certain animals, why? To be more independent. And it's the same thing as we create and bake the things in our kitchen. Sourdough or sponge, because sponges can be made from many things, from salt and milk and potatoes. And that's all in that 1891 cookbook. So, we're not limited to just yeast and flour sourdoughs. But those are the things that give us some freedom, some food freedom, if you will, in your kitchen. When you have certain items that are standard, it gives you liberty to create things that are pleasing on the table. So that is my excessively extra long beginner's sourdough. There's a lot of information I left out. Your sourdough will go through certain changes, and I probably should just do a whole nother interview or video. I should probably just do a whole nother video on that. But, again, you get your fingers dirty. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. All right, so I've covered my dough because I do not want the top to dry out from air. And I will probably, let's see, it's probably about what do you think, noon? I think it's noon. So I'm really kind of late in the game here to be starting my bread, but I really wanted to do this video today, so I needed to have all my ducks in a row. But that means I shouldn't put this in until 10 o'clock, but because it has to cook for an hour and a half, I'm probably going to rush it a little bit. I'll put it in about 8, and then I will show you guys the end product. Oh, I've cooked the sourdough, and then I just butter the tops and the bottoms real quick. And then, I sprinkle a little salt on top.
No, that's good.
Okay, so it's morning. I baked this last night. Tap, tap, tap. There's the bum. And then they want toast this morning out of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut it in the middle, though, for texture. Nice, airy and spongy at the same time. Okay, I did the majority of the sourdough video yesterday. It was a really hard video to do because there's just a lot of activity going on here, so I haven't even edited it yet. I don't think that it's going to be a really clear video, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put it up, and then maybe we'll do a second one. I don't know. We'll see what kind of questions you guys give. Please give me questions if I haven't answered what you needed to know. If I've just created more questions for you, go ahead and comment and let me know that I can either answer or that'll just tell me I need to do a whole new video. But one thing that I did do was I started this sourdough starter. It's right now about 4:30, so the video was done noonish yesterday, so a little over 24 hours. I want to show you what the starter looks like so that you have a good idea of an active starter. Okay, see the bubbles, it's good. This is just over 24 hours old. The smell is telling me I smell a lot of flour still. So that tells me that it's not really ready where I want it to use as a starter. You want to get beyond the flour. You want to get beyond that paste smell. Again, as I mentioned, or as if depending on where I put this at, I mentioned in the video about flour and water make paste. So you want it to get more of a little bit of a more pungent smell. Now here's what I feel like I've left out in the video. Because it was such a chaotic video to do with everything going on, I'm not sure what I've said or I haven't said, so I may repeat myself on several different occasions. I just want to make sure you get enough information. When you start your flour and water mixture, excuse me, as it begins to work, you're going to get to a stage within a relatively short amount of time, like, I'll say 72 hours, depending on your heat and stuff, that you look at it and you go, oh wow, that's doing really well. And about that time is when you want to start feeding it again. And you can actually feed it. I sometimes, depending on what's going on, I might go ahead and feed it a day or two after starting it. Remove some of it. But what you're looking for, if you get to the point where your starter is separating, where you're getting a clear liquid on top, that's not bad. It's doing what it's supposed to do, but that means that it needs to be fed before you use it, for sure and for certain. The smell should still be nothing more. It should not be an offensive smell. It should be maybe a pungent smell, maybe a strong smell of something sour, but it's not going to be an offensive smell. I gave a description in the video of something that is offensive smell. Some people have even referred to the smell as like fingernail polish removers. I think it's acetone, but fingernail polish remover. And that also, usually about that stage, okay, so about the time that you get the fingernail polish, and honestly, I looked for that after reading. I looked for that smell. That was not the smell I got. What I did get was an offensive smell that I couldn't give it a name. I just know that my nose didn't like it, okay? That sounds funny, but that's the nose. And it would be like a darker color liquid on top. Now at that point in time, you can bring your starter back, but you're going to be playing a lot. You shouldn't let it get to that point to begin with. All right, you just shouldn't. And if it does, you can save it, but you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble just learning to nurture your starter before it gets there. But trial and error, okay? You may not even know that stage until you do get there. And like I said, like when I had gotten to that stage before, when I was doing starters down south, I didn't get the fingernail polish remover stage. I just got an offensive stage, and then like beyond that would be the vomit stage. So once you get there, pitch it. But you just start, you're looking for things that aren't right, and if they're kind of just off is when you really start working with your starter. That's why, I've got these 3 starters, because as I told you in the video that I was having some trouble with it. So I was a little concerned I was going to lose them because something just didn't seem right to me. So I went ahead and started another starter, because I was just messing with it, thinking I need to keep my sourdough going. But if something's going on that I have no idea what I can do for it, then I better have a backup plan. So when I put the apples in the 2 starters that I questioned, I went ahead and started a 3rd one. Now they're all happy and healthy. Now I got more starter than I know what to do with. And this other one that I did for you guys yesterday is an example. I will probably go ahead and I'll feed it a little bit, and I'll try to get it used up without feeding it too much, because you don't need a lot of starter going on. Even if you use it all the time, you're going to find you've got more than you know what to do with. I mean, I've had this stuff going in a gallon jar before, and it just becomes so much. One book that I read, they actually liked sourdough pancakes. We tried them. We just didn't get into them. When we tried them, my starter was had a stronger flavor to it. So now that I've learned how to work it where it's milder, we may try it again. I may have enough this weekend where I just go ahead and try it just because I've got it here. Let me think here. Okay, I talked with you about my cookbook from 1891 that has sponges in it. Now, back to the starter that I started yesterday, that's all nice and bubbly, but still has a pasty smell. I would let it set another couple days. I would feed it probably tomorrow, 48 hours, 72 hours, somewhere in there. If I wanted to try to use it on the 3rd day, I'd feed it tomorrow, 48 hours. And I would definitely feed it 3 days later. Again, my heat situation is different than different people, and some people may not even want to feed it that soon. It just depends. You just really have to get to know the process of this. But in the book, in that old book, you know, basically what they tell you with a lot of the sponges is you start it in the morning and you use it at night, or you start it after supper and you use it in the morning. So their process, you know, they probably set it on the wood stove. Of course, that does activate stuff. I mean, and if you're activating stuff close to the wood stove, it's going to go bad 3 times as quick as you do on a normal, you know, a conventional kitchen counter of today. So just some things to throw out there that I know I probably didn't cover. Don't feel discouraged if you start a starter or start a starter twice and it just doesn't work out. Try, you know, if you're really apprehensive about it, start from the beginning, put your apple in it, put some pineapple in it. I want to say I even heard of some other fruit juice. Those, but I can't, I haven't used them. I haven't used pineapple either, just apples. And I know apples work. Apples usually turn it around. And you can leave your apples in for a while. You can take them out. Keep an eye on it. If you feel you need to put another apple in, that's fine. That's usually a good trick, though, to keep that stuff going. Each time, if you find that, man, I've started 4 or 5 starters and they've both turned out, take note of what you're doing. Take note of, have you learned anything in the process? Because again, this is really super easy. It's just we're uncomfortable with these type of processes. And once you've put some elbow grease into it, you've made some mistakes, you're going to just get really comfortable, and you're going to start feeling like, oh, I was really intimidated for nothing. You know, that's how I feel about so many things, is that I get held off because I feel so intimidated about certain things. And once I do them, it's like, wow, I mean, really? I didn't do that because of this? That's insane. So, all right. So I just wanted to add all this stuff in case I left it out in yesterday's video. Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to learn about sourdough bread. I am so excited to share this with you. I'm working on my appeal. Okay, really, I've just been informed by my 3rd son that I have flour on my nose. It's been there the entire video. My cameraman did not note this. Really?
Sorry?
Thanks, baby.
You're welcome, Mama.
Did I get it off, or is it still there?
Still there.
It's still there? Hi, everyone. Today we are going to talk about... I didn't say hi, everyone. This is Leah at Family Heritage Living. I just simply said hi, everyone, right? Oh, my cameraman is in shock because I have said I'm going to quit saying, hi, everyone. It's Leah from Family Heritage Living.
You just said it.
Twice. All right, guys.
You want sourdough too? You want sourdough too?